I felt really guilty about causing the death of a mother owlbear, so I made a statue of her cub. First I crumbled a chunk of aluminum foil and wrapped that in thin wire for some extra grip. Covered that in a couple sheets of clay. I found I could smooth the lump of clay on the table. Then I rolled out and chopped some clay like pretzel dough. Then tried using those as legs, but the brazenly big bear body caused the sculpture to collapse under its own weight. We've all been there. So I cut some pieces of armature wire, shaped those into position, and wrapped the clay legs around that. Then I made a shape for the paws. I rolled out more clay strings and cut out mostly equal chunks to make them into 20 little claws. Talons? You decide. Then I poked a bunch of holes for those to go in. I actually played the two Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games on PS2 as a kid. I remember really enjoying crawling through the dungeons with my friends. When I heard that Baldur's Gate 3 would be a little bit different, I was actually really worried that I wouldn't end up liking it. Fortunately, the game went above and beyond mine and I think most people's expectations of it. In fact, this project would have probably been done a lot sooner if I didn't enjoy playing it. Next, it was time to start working on the tail. I put clay on the armature, and it started out looking like it might become a beaver owlbear, but once I got the tips done, it went back to looking like just a normal owlbear. Then it was time for the head. For that, I used a ball of foil on a wire as the base, and smothered that in clay. I started the process of shaping that into more of an owl shape. For the eyes, I used little glass cabochons, which I painted with black acrylic paint and a couple shades of yellow, using a tiny brush to layer them on. I messed this up a bunch of times, but luckily acrylic paint scrapes away pretty easily with a toothpick, so I just kept trying until I liked it, even if the camera was a little out of focus. Then I added and shaped the clay around the eyes until they looked sufficiently owly. I was going for a bit of a side-eye look because of a certain scene with a certain character scaring the Owlbear Cub. I will never forgive them for it. Kind of ended up making them do the thing where the eyes follow you around though, which is kind of creepy. I don't really know how I did it, so I'll never be able to replicate that. And with that done, I moved on to making a beak. Then I put that on, then I put that on, and used a silicone shaper and scrapey tool for the beak textures. And blended that in with more clay. The next step was to attach the head to the body, which took a lot more clay than I expected to accomplish that. And once that was secure, I decided to go back to the face and bulk it out and finalize some more facial features. I wanted the central part of the face to have the right shape because that's what stops it looking like a pigeon and makes it look more like an owl. Then I added the ears as the final part of the head. Just kidding, I still didn't like the face, so I went back and fixed that. But good news! This means we're finally almost done with the ugly phase of the sculpture, which is actually the only part of sculpting I don't really like. It just takes a really long time to get out of the ugly phase. I mean, it could just be because I'm still really new at everything, so hopefully that'll get better with time. Now the actual last thing I did to the face was use a silicone tool to make a little fluffy texture, and then I was on to the rest of the fur. Now let me tell you, this whole process took forever. I rolled out and cut roughly 1 million similar sized things of clay, then I layered those out in a couple of areas so I could test how it looked when I blended them in. And I was happy with the results, so I did the same thing in the spots that wouldn't get feathers later. I'd never used this method successfully in past builds for fur textures, so I was really excited that I figured it out here. Speaking of which, the whole purpose of this channel has been to document the entirety of my art journey, so if you like this kind of content and you want to come along for the ride, just hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. I'd really appreciate it and it'd really help me out. It'd be really cool if I could hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and then maybe YouTube would consider me a real human being and toss me a couple of coins to pay for some art and video supplies. Next, I gave the underside shorter here by just carving lines at different amounts of pressure like I had done on a couple of older projects. Now, of all the things in the entire project, the feathers took the longest. In fact, they were the longest individual part I'd done in any project so far. At first, I tried laying sheets of clay where the feathers were going to go. My goal was to just carve the feathers out individually and put the sheets back where they were, but I realized pretty quickly that it was pointless and it wasn't going to work the way I had intended. Then I cut out and baked a single feather to see if I could get it to work as some sort of press thing. And that did not work. So then I just started cutting a few of them out by hand. But then I remembered that my girlfriend had mentioned we had some kind of silicone putty stuff that would work to make a mold. And this was a lifesaver. This is where being a full-time factory worker actually came in handy for once in my life, because I eventually found a way to make it an assembly line type of process, instead of just me doing each step in the process. Actually, that's how work is sometimes too. Now, this still took a really long time. I tried to get my assistant Audrey to help, but she was already super busy that night. So I resigned to doing it myself. So once I got them cut out, I meticulously placed each individual feather in a not at all tedious process. But honestly, it was kind of relaxing once I got into a groove. I think my favorite Baldur's Gate 3 moment so far was the time I figured out how powerful the shove mechanic could be. My friend and I were struggling against a mini-boss early on in the game, and it was down to the wire. No potions, no healing spells, so we were about to fail and have to reload a save from roughly 2 hours earlier. Then I got an idea. What if I used our strongest character and just kind of gently help the boss off the map a little bit? So I gave it a go, and sure enough, the boss plummeted to their demise, and we made it out alive. Needless to say, I have used this tactic on more than one occasion since then, usually just because I find it amusing. Honestly, I don't really need to do it that much anymore. And then it was at this point that I realized I didn't know if these ears were actually ears, if that makes sense. So I looked it up, and it turns out owls with external ears actually just have tufts of feathers, so I covered those in feathers too. Then I threw it in the oven, primed it in white, and finally began painting. I hit the feathers and fur in a brown base color, and some darker brown on the feathers, and I made sure to get in the little spots beneath the feathers. I tried throwing on some watered down brown paint, hoping that it would get in those cracks and crevices a little bit easier, but it just kind of made a mess, really. So then I just moved on to adding a lighter brown layer to the fur, and dry brushed on some yellowish highlights, and hit the stomach with a light beige color, and then the same color on the base, making sure to remove the protective masking tape that I forgot to warn you to put on earlier, and painted there too. For the beak, I went with a black color, and the same for the claw talon nails. Now I needed a base for the sculpture, so I traced a circle thing from IKEA onto the foam and cut that out. I wanted a stony, natural-looking backdrop. In the game, you encounter the Owlbear Cub and its mother in a reddish, brownish, tannish cave, but I felt like the sculpture would kind of blend in with that, so I went with some gray seiryu stones and spider wood that I would normally use in my aquascaping. I glued that together with hot glue, and then I added some super glue also because I was scared that it was going to fall apart because it was heavy. Then I drenched the whole base in craft glue, so I could throw down some dirt mix that I used for my reptiles and amphibians. I dripped some isopropyl alcohol on there and then just poured it out by the capful. Then I sprayed the whole thing down with a scenic glue mixture I found in a Luke Towan video. Talon? It consists of a bit of Mod Podge, a much bigger bit of water, and a drop of dish soap. This helped pretty well, except on some parts. But I just super glued more dirt in those places. Man, I'd hate to be the guy who has to clean that up. Then I added some tiny flaky gravel. I glued the rocks to the base and blended up some flocking so I'd have some more variation. I poured that on and added some thicker clumps in key spots. I'm extremely happy with how this sculpture turned out. I honestly feel like my skills are progressing a little bit every time I do a project. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe if you don't mind, and good luck. Have fun.